So a special welcome to everyone today. Copies of the current Balch column listing programs and other events are available on the back table. And along with other informative information about the library. Our Balch column may also be viewed online on our website, and events are also posted on our website on the calendar, and we post them to social media. For those who may not know, the water fountain is to the left, the restrooms are straight back. If you have any kind of an electronic device, if you would please at this time either turn off or mute, it would be appreciated by everyone. Please remember there's a virtual audience. The event is being recorded and will be published on the library's YouTube. The link will be made available to those of you who have registered for the class and provided an email address. Those of you who are attending virtually may ask questions by posting in the chat box. It is my special pleasure to welcome our guest speaker, Library Associate Travis Shaw. Travis is a public history professional with nearly 2 decades of experience in historic preservation, archaeology, and museum education. He joined the staff at Thomas Balch Library in 2015 and serves as the Director of Education at the Virginia Piedmont Heritage Area Association. Please join me in welcoming Travis Shaw.
All right, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to talk about a subject that is near and dear to my heart. Long before I came to the Thomas Balch Library in the Virginia Piedmont Heritage Area, I worked for a number of different cultural resource management firms, so doing architectural history and archaeology, particularly in my home state of Maryland. So I will not apologize for the gratuitous use of the Maryland flag. I am very proud and very happy to talk about the history of Maryland, and in particular, the online resources that are available to doing property research. This research is, of course, incredibly important for genealogists, being able to research deeds and other land records, finding out where your ancestors lived. Of course, all of this information can be applied to a lot of different uses as well. So the tools that we're going to go over today are by no means exhaustive. I do not know absolutely everything there is to know about property research. What I'm going to give you guys is a taste of the resources that are available, first of all, online, so that you can do everything that we talk about here today from the comfort of your own home or the Thomas Balch Library. And they're also free, which is, of course, also important and very nice. So the 4 resources that we're going to focus on today: the Maryland Inventory of Historic Properties, the Maryland Historical Trust Cultural Resource Information System, or MEDUSA. Not sure how they put MEDUSA, but that's what they call it. Maryland Land Records, which is going to be kind of the meat of what we're talking about, the most powerful tool in the toolbox, and then plats.net. All of these resources, as I said, are available online. They're available for free. You can access them from anywhere, and everyone who is here in the room today and watching at home, the library will send you a digital copy of this handout, which kind of gives a step-by-step kind of cheat sheet of how to use all these. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about each of these. We're going to look at examples of how they're used, and we're going to talk about kind of what case they would be most useful in. Each of these kind of covers a different aspect of property research, and not all of them are going to be equally useful in every situation. We're going to start out with probably the most fun of these resources, and that is the Maryland Inventory of Historic Properties. This is Maryland's state version of the National Register. There's thousands, somewhere in the neighborhood of close to 50,000 properties, over 40,000 properties listed on the Maryland Inventory of Historic Properties. These are properties that have been surveyed and researched by architectural historians and included on this state register. It also includes archaeological sites, although that's not going to be as useful for genealogical research. Also, a lot of the archaeological sites have had information redacted out of the fear that people will want to go to these sites and dig them up and mess with the historic integrity of them. So it's really most useful for built resources. And from our perspective, as genealogists or amateur historians, it is most useful in the sense that why reinvent the wheel? Why do the research if somebody else has already done it? This is my first stop when I'm looking at the history of a property. I want to make sure that I'm, not going through the process of doing all this research when it's already available. So they literally changed the website in the last 2 weeks because I had revised this to make sure everything was up to date, and just found out this morning that the web address has changed. This is the new address, but if you just Google, Maryland Inventory of Historic Properties, you're going to be directed to the website. And what you're going to find there is a number of search options. You can search by the MIHP number. I don't expect anyone to actually know the MIHP number that they're looking for. This is the number that's assigned to them by the Department of Planning, the Maryland Historical Trust. It's kind of a number system that's based on the county that it's in, when the property is listed, et cetera. Don't worry about that. You can search by the property name. If you know the name of the house you're looking for, the farm you're looking for, the church you're looking for, the property you're looking for, that's where you're going to put that in. This is particularly useful. A lot of us in researching our ancestors, you will sometimes see a reference to a house that they're living at, a lot of named properties. And we'll show you exactly what that looks like. This is where you're going to go for that. Search by address. The address, put it in just like you would on Google Maps or whatever. Or you can search by county. That's not so much useful for doing research, but it is kind of fun just to go through, browse different sites in the county. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to switch over to this website. Here we go. It's now apps.mht.maryland.gov/MIHP. Here's our search by property name, search by address, search by county. We are going to go with an example that I know will show up in here. It's a historical house I looked at in Frederick County many, many years ago. And the name of that historical, it's an 18th century property known as Stillwork. So type in Stillwork. Hit search, and there it is on Green Valley Road near Mount Airy. So when you search, you're going to come up with, any of the search terms that are brought up are going to appear down below. And all you need to do is go over to where it says PDF. There's a little PDF icon. Click on that, and that is going to bring up the inventory form. Maryland Inventory of Historic Places. Forms or historic properties. The forms are very, very similar to what you'd see on a National Register form. So you're going to see architectural information. You're going to see contextual information about the history of the property, who lived there. One caveat to using these for research is the form is only as good as the person filling it out. Some of these are very, very, very cursory top-level information, particularly with large historic districts. One of the examples I use for that end is, if you look at the historic district of downtown Frederick, Maryland, there are hundreds of properties. You are not going to find a tome of information about every single one of those buildings. It's just not there. Some forms, and I use this one because I know it's a good one, have photographs, maps, chains of title for the property, which are incredibly useful for someone doing research. Some of them even have, I think this one even has drawings of some of the hardware on the doors and things like that. So all sorts of information that may be interesting, not only to an architectural historian, but someone who's doing research for genealogical purposes. So what you see here, this is kind of the introduction, what's going on here, where the documentation is held. And then as we scroll down, and this is a fairly long one, I forgot how many pages this one is, but as we scroll down, you have the property record. And again, just like a National Register form, you're going to have the criteria by which it's listed, the justification as to why it's listed, if it's eligible for listing. Occasionally we will get these that are not eligible, you know, it's for whatever reason, the property has been too heavily altered over the years. But for almost everyone that's listed, you will find a great deal of information. Here we have just a little blurb on what the property is. So it's built in 2 stages, 1758, then again 1799, talks a little bit about the outbuildings. And then we get into kind of more formulaic things, what period it's applicable to, what are the historic themes that it's applicable to. And then we get finally into the meat of the actual register. So a lot of architectural information about the design of the house, how it's laid out. All that's kind of interesting if you're an architecture person. But then we get more of the kind of formulaic things. More information on the building itself, talking about the different construction phases. Yeah, this is a big one. I like this one because it's not only have I been in this house a few times, but it has a great deal of information on it. The person who prepared the form and then the additional information. There are pages and pages and pages of information here about every room in the house. The outbuildings. I know you're thinking this is not very useful for a genealogist, but trust me, there is information in here that will be useful. Drawing of the house. Here we go. The person filling out this form, one of my favorite architectural historians in Frederick County history, has an entire chain of title from the current ownership on back to the, I think she takes it back to the 1840s, so not all the way back to the 1750s and the original construction, but information that will be useful. You know, who's living in this house, the size of the lot. Most importantly, though, over here on the left, these are the deed references. And when we get to Maryland Land Rec a little later on, you can take these numbers, punch them in the Maryland Land Rec, and it will bring up the original deeds. So if you are lucky enough to have a property that is listed on this register, and you are lucky enough that someone has included a chain of title, which they often do, not 100% of the time by any means, but if you are lucky, you are going to have that research laid out for you right there. It's going to take a lot of the hard work out of doing the property research. So we can continue to look down. Yeah, there's the drawings of the hinges. I did distinctly remember that. There's maps showing where the property is historically within a historic context, modern topographical maps, and then there's photos. As part of the documentation process, they will be photographed. As I said, this was a very cool house. Very, very interesting property. So, you know, if you're lucky enough, your ancestors might have lived in one of these properties, you're going to see a whole lot of resources that are available. So that was
How did it get its name?
How did it get its name? So I have thought about this way more than any normal person should. I think it's a pun. Because I think you could read still work in 2 different ways. That it's, you know, still in the sense of calm, or still work as in a sense of like, I'm still working on this. This is a work in progress. One thing that you will notice, and we'll look at a lot of this later on, is these Maryland properties, when they're patented, they all have these very distinctive names, and some of them are very funny. Some of them are like borderline lewd. Some of them are definitely meant to be puns or jokes in some manner. Still work, I will always wonder about how that got its name. Just to give a little bit of variety, we'll pick a different county, someplace that I'm maybe not as familiar with, just to see what kind of resources we have there. So we'll go to a search by county. Let's go to Worcester County here. And we just click on that. It's going to bring up every property in order in which its MIHP number is listed. Let's pick the Evans house in Berlin, out near Ocean City here. I have no idea what this property is. I've never looked at this before in my life. So we see the same kind of introductory page. History of the house. Kind of the legal documentation that goes with one of these forms. And it looks like this one is mostly focused on the architecture of the house itself. Not a lot of historical information on the family that lived there. So this is a good example of one that might not be as useful to someone from a genealogical perspective. But again, if you're looking for the history of the house, you're going to find a little bit of information. Some of this may look very familiar to you if you've done research here at the Balch Library before, because Virginia has a similar system. Virginia has Department of Historic Resources has a register. We have a series of files here at the Balch Library we call the Lewis Edwards files that are local architectural histories. As someone who's spent a lot of time in them, I can tell you a lot of them look like this. It's just a handful of pages, basic architectural, basic historical information. You're not going to find as detailed of a description as we did with still work. So I would say most of the forms you're going to look at are somewhere between those two extremes. It may be helpful, it may not be helpful. So before we move on, any questions about this register? So this is useful if you know the name of a property that your ancestor lived in. Plug it in here first, just to see if that property has already been listed, already been researched. You might be able to glean some information, particularly if the architectural historian put in a chain of title or very detailed information on the family that lived. Yes.
So I noticed when you clicked on Stillwork, it
Yes.
took us to Medusa. Do they all take us to Medusa?
So Medusa has been integrated into, or I should say, actually, the inventory has been integrated into Medusa. Medusa is basically another way of looking at the inventory. I kind of include it in this presentation as a subsection of the inventory, just as a different way to look at it. So, and they've done, they used to be kind of, I don't want to say separate, but related. And they've basically fully integrated them. Medusa has everything that is in this. Yes.
So when you search by county, the county's changed over the years. So how do you deal with that?
It is based on the location that the property is in today. So 2024 county boundaries. It's based. The inventory is location based, and it's based according to modern county boundaries, I guess is how it's.
To have a name of a property and the general area, you don't really know what the county boundaries would have changed over the years. You just check the counties, the present day counties all around it.
Yeah, you can do that. Actually, a good way to do that, if you know where the property is today, would be to use Medusa, which we're going to pull up next, because that is basically all the information that's in here, but map based. So, and that's a great introduction to Medusa. We're going to go back to the, not that, the slideshow here real quick. So we talked about how to search. We talked about what the results look like. In this case, this is just a screenshot. I pulled up St. Mary's County. Really cool properties here, but we're going to move to Medusa because Medusa really integrates completely with the Maryland inventory. Medusa is an example of a GIS, geographical information system. Basically, what that means is this is a way to store information, display information, analyze information spatially. So we're looking at maps and we are pulling information from that map. And in this case, Medusa is essentially the inventory put on the map, as well as a few other things. National Register properties will be displayed on Medusa. Not that this is applicable to genealogists, but properties that have easements and things like that will be displayed. So when you pull up Medusa, you're going to see a display with a map of Maryland. You're going to see there's a few different tabs here. You can search by text, search the map. You can change the layers on the map. You can change, if you want to look at a topographical map, if you want to look at a satellite photo, whatever. And then to find the property, you type in the address up there. Basically, just like Google Maps, you type in an address, it'll pull it up on the map. So if you're searching, you want to use that box to the left. Text search, you type in the name of the property. Map search, you type in like the address, things like that. If you know the address, you can type it in on the address bar as well. And this is what is going to look like. In this case, I just typed in Cumberland, Maryland. That's downtown Cumberland. You can see a mess of colors. Every one of those colors has a significance within the system. Anything in red, all these little red dots, all these big red boxes, these blobs, those are properties that are listed in that Maryland inventory that we just looked at. Anything yellow, that's a property that there's a preservation easement on. Anything in purple is a national register listing. So these are properties that wouldn't be listed in the state register, but are nationally significant. In this case, this big line along the river, that's the C&O Canal. There's a few other properties in the area. Green, you don't really need to worry about. These are determination of eligibility short forms. That's kind of an in-house forms being used by the Maryland Historical Trust. Don't worry about the green ones. Basically, that means that they're in the process of determining the eligibility of the site. So this system is very, very, very similar to, as I said, the where is it? The inventory. Here's the actual site. One thing you can do is if you know the general location that you're looking for, but you don't know the exact address or name or anything like that, you can just zoom and pan around the map like you would in Google Maps. And that's going to bring up different properties. To show you what this looks like, I'm going to zoom in on a property just because I happened to zoom in on it last night. We're just outside of Frederick, along Route 70. We click on that red blob and we find there's the listing. F597 is the number. The Smith Molesworth Farmstead is the name. There's the address. And if we go down to where it says scanned PDF link, and we click on that, it's going to take us right back to the inventory, right back to the form. I bring this one up in particular because I was messing around and I found one that I did. So very exciting. I was telling Anna here this morning that I was looking at this form and I didn't realize it last night, but it had been one I worked on until I got down to the photographs at the very bottom. First of all, I couldn't forget the awful wallpaper in that house. But I was like, man, that is terrible handwriting on those pictures. And sure enough, that is my handwriting. So anyways, this was a cool little 19th century farmstead that obviously went through major renovations in the 60s, complete with shag carpet and floral wallpaper. But another good example of one of these forms that has information on genealogical, or that would be useful for genealogical researchers once we get back before the photos and through all the historical context. I mean, I think I wrote 20 pages of historical context for this property, including a chain of title. I want to get to that chain of title. Oops. Oh, okay. Because we're going to use it later. So where is it? Shoot. So Medusa is a cool tool. It's probably the most fun thing we're going to talk about because it does have that visual aspect to it. The map is very useful if you know the vicinity of the area you're looking at. You want to learn more about the town or the community. It's a good way of visualizing everything. Here's the small town of Kemar. You can pull up the property there. There's a historic district, the Bruceville Historic District. That's going to bring up the inventory form for the entire district. There are, and I don't know, I know of a few on here. There are archaeological sites on here, but as I said, because of the fear that people will go to these sites, they'll disturb them. One thing you'll find is, that big sword site, I know exactly where that site is in that field. They're gonna give you a big circle. They're not going to pinpoint the exact location. But it's a cool site, and you can just see just by looking at it, the density of historical sites. It's easy to say that there are 40,000 plus sites on the inventory, but to actually see that on a map, I think is pretty incredible. Very, very fun tool to mess around with. I mentioned that there are a few other things that you can do here. You can measure, which is kind of useful. You can measure in acres. You can kind of draw like a polygon on the map, can be useful for determining meets and bounds and acreage on a property. You can measure distance, one point to another. Sometimes we find those documents that say, they were a mile from this point on the road. You can kind of measure that and see where it fits in. There's all kinds of different tools for selecting things, but all the way down here at the bottom, one of the best tools to use is this little one here, change base map. So what we can do is, instead of looking at this kind of bland topographical map, we can bring up satellite imagery, which again is very useful for if you're looking at a historical property. Sometimes the historical boundaries make a lot more sense from the air. You can see where the boundaries are on fence lines and roads in relation to other properties. So I find that to actually be an incredibly useful tool, being able to look at the satellite imagery. So takes a lot longer to load, as you can tell, but it is a cool tool. So again, just like with the inventory, Medusa is only really useful to the genealogist, to the family researcher, if there's a property your family is associated with. And even then, you don't know the quality of the form you're going to get. I include these, and I include them first because when I'm doing property research, this is the first place I stop. Check if it's there. If not, you're going to move on to some other options. But any questions about any of this so far? I think, yes.
I'm not gonna be personal about what I'm looking for, but I lived in a farmhouse in Howard County. They said it was built in 1854.
Okay.
1852. It has since been torn down. But what you're looking at are places of historical interest, or are they on when someone built a house in 1850s? Would that be registered somewhere on this, even if it's not there anymore? I mean, how do you find out that information?
Excellent questions. To answer the easy part of the question first, there are properties that are in this system that have been demolished. If they were surveyed at some point in the past and have since been demolished, they will still be in the system. There have been properties I've had to research where that is the only information I've been able to get, was because somebody had taken photographs and measured it, did everything in the past. There is no system for automatic inclusion in this inventory. Just because a house is old does not mean it's going to be listed. There's several different ways that a house ends up on this register. My personal experience, a lot of it was because when I was in cultural resource management, a lot of the architectural and archaeological work we were doing was because construction was happening. They're widening a highway, they're building a power line corridor, they're doing something like that. We would go in and we'd survey the area. So for instance, let's see, a good example of this, they were building a cell tower out on Catoctin Mountain, so in northern Frederick County. We had to float a balloon at the height of the tower, and I had to go around the area and figure out what historic sites would be within the viewshed of that tower. That sounds absolutely insane, but through that process, we basically had, like, say everything within a mile, record any house that looks more than 50 years old. And that's a huge thing to do. You'd go, we'd contact the landowner, sometimes the landowner would be nice enough to let us go onto the property, take pictures, do everything. Sometimes they gave us all sorts of cool documentation. Sometimes the landowners never responded. In which case I stood in the public right of way on the road, took a picture of the house, and then did all the archival research on the property. There's always a chance that your property got caught up in one of these types of surveys. Maryland Historical Trust also occasionally works with developers, landowners, and so forth to fund these sorts of surveys. That house I was at, Still Work, had been surveyed back in the 1990s, early 90s. And as part of a proffer from a developer looking to create a housing development nearby, they had the developer offer up some money to go through, look at some of the local eligible places and either update the existing forms or add new forms. So sometimes that will happen. Sometimes homeowners themselves want their house listed and can initiate the process. If it's a state-owned property, it kind of automatically happens. So there's a lot of different ways that your house might have gotten on there. Do you want to try and look for this property to see if it's on here?
If you wanna do that.
Sure. Do you know the address of the?
All I know, I guess it's a rural route, it's
Okay.
on Route 97, which is Georgia Avenue extended in Glenwood. And
Okay.
it's next to the Methodist Church, which I think may now be an Episcopal church, I forget the name of the
Okay, so
road next to it. Glenwood. Howard County.
Glenwood, we can type in Glenwood here. Glenwood, Maryland, USA. There's Glenwood. So we have a number of properties kind of here. This big blob looks like that is the Mackall Wolf Farm, Walnut Springs Nursery. We have Longwood Chapel.
I think that's it, along with Chapel would be Roxbury Mills, it was on that corner, right across
Alright.
the street from that
We
corner.
have Cattails Creek Stone Bridge across the road here. The Dependency, 3188 Roxbury Mills Road. Did that,
I don't know.
I can bring it up and see what the property looks like here. So there's a form. Two-story stone manor house of Gustavus Warfield and family. 99-acre.
No, it wasn't a
property.
stone
No.
house,
Okay,
so that may not be
so
it.
that may not be on there. Let's try. Pindell Store and House, Matthew Pindell House. That looks like it's across the street directly from the Judge William Matthews house. Glenwood Country Club building. Yeah,
Towards Cooksville. Glenwood. There, Union Chapel Road, that's right there.
okay,
There's the church with the yellow.
that's the church.
Yeah,
So there is
It was the quarter right there, yes.
Alfred and Sophia Matthews farmhouse site. So if it says site, that means that the house is no longer existing.
Right.
So this may, I love it when it works out like that. It makes me look smart. So there was a form. Let's see here. Alfred and Sophia Matthews farmhouse, 2-story 5-bay, 1868 wood frames, deteriorated condition located in 7.5 acres, Glenwood in Howard County. Property owner is redeveloping the site and the house is going to be demolished.
And then, they built two houses. Just if anybody's interested, when we moved in during World War II, there was a slave quarters.
Oh,
And my father, I remember, I was, young enough, as a kindergarten, first grade, remember my father and the neighbors tearing down the slave quarters. And where the slave quarters were, and the barn, which was back of the house, they built two big houses, two little mini mansion houses. But the site of where the house was, there's nothing there, it's all overgrown. It was 25 acres originally when my dad bought it. But it was just an interesting, I just remember it made a big impression on me of the slave quarters. They were like a log house.
that's amazing.
And so can you give me the number of that?
Oh, sure. This is HO-850. And here we have actually a great example where this person researched the history of the Matthews family, when they arrived, what they were doing in town, talking about the there are 14 children, 12 of whom survived childhood.
Guess that's why they need somebody to help take care of the children. The slave quarters were rather large. It wasn't just one little, it was like a double thing with like a little tiny windows at the top. I can remember very clearly.
Talking about Alfred and Sophia Matthews farmhouse, to Joseph and Ida Donhauser. Donhausers moved to Howard County from Baltimore City. 6 owners have held the property since 1941.
Oh, my father would be there.
So,
Murray, that's from Murray.
so great information.
Thank you so much.
Here we have a chain of title. Fantastic. Yes.
So speaking of chain of title, we have a question about that.
Oh, sure.
Oh,
This murder.
He's on there.
oh, I see it.
There you go.
Oh, my goodness.
So here's a question. So she's talking about a slave quarters. If she were to read this and the information about the slave quarters weren't there, is there a way to add information
There is.
like that?
There is a process. You would have to contact the Maryland Historical Trust. And they could guide you through that process.
That would be so neat if that was an outcome of something like that.
That would be amazing. Yeah, and I mean, that would be information that would be of interest to people researching this.
Yes.
You had a question about chain of title.
Yeah, so from Joseph Roby, the question
Oh,
is,
Hi, Joseph.
regarding the Maryland inventory of historic properties, you showed a few examples of forms with chain of titles. Is there a requirement that those nomination forms include the chain of title? Do you know why Virginia is different? And he says hi back.
There is no requirements. Again, a lot, as I said before, the usefulness of these documents really depends on the person filling them out. Generally speaking, Maryland Historical Trust appreciates it if you include as much information as you can. But as I said, the quality can vary considerably depending on the conditions that, you know, why they're being filled out, the requirements of the particular project. If it's, you know, something involving kind of, as I said, cultural resource management, a lot of it depends on the scale of the project. Large districts tend to have less information on individual structures, more information on the overall district, things like that. That being said, here's an excellent example of someone who did a really good job. And I bet if we continue to scroll, we're gonna see some photos of the property. There's the drawing of the house. Again, fantastic.
We said had 14 children. I do not. There were only 2 big bedrooms upstairs. And I remember I had neighbors where I lived there. Oh, my goodness. Oh, I'm overwhelmed.
There, so, and it's hard to read, but those photos were taken in 2004, so.
It didn't look that bad.
Yeah. You had a question, sir?
Well, back on the chain of title, if you could go back to the.
Sure. We'll
Page.
scroll up
I
here.
noticed something that was interesting.
Oops.
Okay, the fourth. 1, 2, 3, fifth row, Savings Institution of Sandy Spring. Would that have represented a foreclosure?
It is certainly possible. That would be my guess, either a foreclosure or, I mean, it could be there was a death and it went into some sort of trusteeship. Any number of reasons why a bank would have held the title to the house. What we can do is we can use this as an example and we can look up this document in the Maryland Land Rec and find out exactly why, if you'd like. So I'll leave this here and we will come back to that.
Oh, my goodness.
So as I said, these are kind of, keep pulling up the wrong thing, kind of very surface level things. Your first stop, if you know there's a property. The most expansive, most useful, and also, in my opinion, most intimidating resource is marylandlandrec.net. Maryland, unlike Virginia, has digitized almost every single land record from the 17th century to today. And it is available online if you know how to navigate this site. This is an incredible resource. When people come to do research here at the Thomas Balch Library, we hold land deeds for Loudoun County going back to the 18th century. They're on microfilm. You have to find the index, you have to, scroll through the microfilm. I think our microfilm collection only goes up to what, the 1890s? Otherwise, you have to go to the courthouse. In a lot of other counties in Virginia, you don't even have that luxury. You have to go straight to the courthouse to do this kind of research. You can do this from the comfort of your own home, and it covers the entirety of the state of Maryland. This is an incredible resource. It is very, very not user-friendly. So hopefully, if you learn anything today, it's to learn how to navigate Maryland land record. So the first thing you're going to see when you pull up the website is a sign-in page. You do have to create an account. Just go up to the top, create an account. It's free. All you need is an email address, email, password. You put that in. Yeah, there you go, new account. If you have trouble, there is a phone number you can call at the Maryland State Archives. They'll walk you through it, but it's very straightforward. If you can set up, any sort of online account, if you can set up an email account, you can set this up. It's fine. The next thing you're going to see once you log in is up in the top left, a little drop-down box to select county. Again, the county boundaries have changed. It will be based on where the property is currently located. 2024 county boundaries. So, everything in Garrett County was once Allegheny County, was once Frederick County, was once Prince George's County, whatever. If you're looking at a property in Garrett County, look at Garrett County. Just as an example, I picked Frederick County, a little biased. When you pick the county up at the top, one of the most useful things on the website, Sandra Dalton, she's the one at the circuit court who handles land records at the courthouse there on Patrick Street. So you have the name, the address, the phone number, the email address, everything you need to or the website address to contact the court. If you run into problems, if you don't know what you're doing, if you need help, just contact that person who's at the top. And they keep that updated, so it's wonderful, Down below is the actual search field. We have a few different types of search here on the left, links. It defaults to instruments, and what that means is it's going to default to, if you know the book and the page number of the deed you're looking for, type it in, it'll find it. Very, very useful if you have a chain of title, or if you know who owns the property currently, you can kind of work your way backwards. There's an individual search. Individual search is great. You type in the name of the grantor or the grantee of the property, and it'll pull them up. The only problem with this is that has only been kind of implemented since 1972. So anything older than 1972, you can't just plug the person's name in. I know, yeah. Otherwise, our lives would be so much easier. Corporation search, that's if you're looking for businesses or trusts or any sort of, LLC, any organization that would own a property. You have Soundex searches, which, work kind of similar to like the Soundex search on an ancestry. You don't have to spell the name correct. It'll pull in things that sound vaguely like it. There's a link on the left side for SDAT. SDAT is the kind of modern tax records website for the state of Maryland. So you can pull up a property and find out who owns it today. It's a lot of work, but if you know who owns the property today and you look at their deed, it's going to give you a name, a book number, a page number. Plug it in here, it'll pull it up. Usually that deed will mention a book number, page number, you can pull that up. That book will mention, or that deed will mention a book number, page number, pull that up. That's how you build a chain of title. If you have nothing more than the current owner of the property, you start there and just work your way backwards. If you don't, there are other options, active and retired indices. I mentioned that you can't search by name if it's anything older than 1972. What you can do is pull up the indices. And just like if you were to pull up our deed records here at the Balch on microfilm, the first thing in the deed book is an alphabetical listing of the names recorded in that deed book. So if your ancestor's name begins with a B and they lived in a property in Frederick County that you know they bought in 1857, you pull up the 1857 or the deed book that covers that period. You look in the B's, you're gonna find your ancestor's name in there. And I'll walk you through, we'll show examples of how all this works. The last thing I don't wanna get into right now is plats.net. We're gonna cover that in a little bit more detail, so. Individual search, this is what it looks like. Again, only useful from 1972. I know this is an older screenshot. It's verified up through pretty much to today almost. Put in a last name, put in a first name, they're gonna pop up. The indices, this is what that looks like. So land record index, microfilm 1748 to 1851. It's drop down box, you know, the next book set starts in 1852 and so on and so forth. I'll show you what that looks like when we get in there. If you're looking for ancestors in the 18th century, early 19th century, even back to the 17th century, this is probably where you're going to spend most of your time, the indices. When you find a record, and in this case, I just pulled that 1748 to 1851 index. This is what you're gonna see. In this case, these are the indices. So you can see it's broken down by year, you know, 1778 to 1803, 1803 to 15, 15 to 22, so on and so forth. And this is what that index looks like. I think I just pulled a random page out of it. So here's your A's, Arnold. That's, I can't read it on there. There's Andrew, Alexander, Anthony, you know, on down, you know, last names Anderson, Arnold, Abson, Andis, whatever. Anyone who's looked at a historic deed book is probably familiar with this. The important information that you need to pull from this is on the left side, because here is our Liber or book number. Number 3, number 4, it's like 6, 7, 5, and our folio or page number. So you pull the book number and the page number out here that's associated with the person you're looking for. And you can type that directly into Maryland Land Rec and it'll pull that page up. The way you do that, up at the top, jump to new volume. When you jump to new volume, it's going to ask what book and page number you're looking for. In this case, a lot of the earlier ones have the clerk's initials, so at the top you see WR. So in this case, I put in WR book 3, page 176, which is the first one here. It's hard to read on here. July 31st, 1782, Andrew Arnold from Charles Methard, looks like the name. So WR3 176, the information straight off the page, you hit go, and it's going to take you directly to the deed. I love this website. So yeah, here is the 1782 deed that we're looking at. What is also fantastic about this, in addition to being online, free, is that you can save the document, you can print the document, you can zoom in, zoom out. Okay, well, let's go to that right now. I know I pulled it up somewhere on here. Is it on here? There's Maryland Land Rec. Okay, so I've already logged in, so you guys don't get to know my password. We will select a county. Let's go back to Howard County to look at the property that we were just looking at. If since you had a question about the bank being listed in there, we can find out exactly why that's there. So Howard County. And so Oh, it logged me out because I took too long. I set this up way before everyone got here. Oh. Nobody look. Here we go. So back to the county selector, Howard County. Here we have the clerk at the circuit court. So if you have problems, you want information, there's the phone number, there's their address. You click on that link, it'll take you right to the court's website. The instrument search, the individual search, the indices. In Howard County, looks like we have going back to retired indices. There are no retired indices. Some of the indices are a little not as useful. And by that I mean you will see ones that aren't as comprehensive. Some of these, the state archives depends on the courthouse to send them these records for them to digitize and so forth. So once you get past a certain point in some counties, you may have to call the person at the courthouse. In this case, their index only goes back to 1840 online, so you may have to contact the county directly. But for the most part, from most counties, you're gonna find what you're looking for. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go back to instruments. We're going to very quickly go back to that inventory form. And you were asking about the Lester and Evelyn Murray granted from the Savings Institution of Sandy Spring.
I remember going to the Sandy Spring Bank with my father.
So
Thanks.
we have the Liber, the book, 184, and we have the folio, 184.
It's also interesting that her father is listed twice. Once
So,
with the saving institution and then once with the specific.
okay, so it looks like the saving institution might be a mortgage. Did he mortgage the property at some point?
All I know is he told me he when he sold it, he got double for what he paid for it.
So.
Now that would be a fisherman's tale.
So it looks like actually the original, the deed from the Worthingtons to the Murrays was recorded the same day as that mortgage, just 2 pages before. So book 184, page 182. So let's start there, 184, 182. So we go over to Maryland Land Rec. We put in book 184. We put in page 182. We hit go. I hereby certify on 13th day of January 1945. Notary public of the state in Lester Hobson, senior president of said body corporate, released or acknowledged, sold the deed of release to, sorry, it's hard to read on there, to the act and deed of said body corporate. So this. Yes.
Building and loan station.
This deed made the 22nd day of January in the year 1945 by John Thomas Worthington Jr. and Melville Lee Worthington, his wife, both of Howard County in the state of Maryland, witnessed in consideration of $5 and other valuable considerations, John Thomas Worthington to grant and convey unto Lester Murray and Evelyn P. Murray, his wife, as tenants by the entireties in fee simple, all the piece or parcel land commonly called Dunlookin Farms, situate and lying near Glenwood. So this is the deed. It has the description, kind of the meets and bounds. To keep scrolling through the pages, you just hit next or previous here. So the next page continues. Now, what is great for us building a chain of title is almost every single deed, it's going to describe the meets and bounds of the property, the size of the property, and then it will say, let's see, where is it? Described and referred to 9,200 acres. So it looks like it's a few parcels together, but it will mention the parcels as they were described elsewhere. So usually it will self-reference the previous sale and previous deed, being the same piece or parcel of land, which by deed dated May 27, 1941, recorded among the land records of Lieber BM Junior, number 170, folio 315. So that was the previous sale in 1941. So, for those of you paying attention here, we can go to jump to new volume. And we can take that earlier reference. Number 170, 315. 170, 315. Go. And that is going to bring up the deed from 1941 from the last time that the property was sold. And if we were to scroll through this deed, we'd probably find a reference to, you know, the same part and parcel. See, beginning, save and accepting. All right. So we have another reference to number 36, page 27. Jump to new volume. 36, 27. And we can keep doing this basically, I think it's this one. Yeah. We can continue to do this on and on and on as long as they continue to make references to the previous deed of sale.
There's the name Warfield, which was a big name
Oh, cool.
in Howard County.
Well, there you go.
Not my family. but
Right.
Warfield was the name, as I recall.
Well, I've got to thank you for giving me a good opportunity to show how this works in action, because it's not always this easy. This made it look very easy because the property was listed. You know, we had a chain of title. We were able to start somewhere. It may be more difficult. You may have to start with the current owner of the property and work your way back. But, you know, as long as you have that reference to the Liber folio, you go to jump to new volume, you can just keep kind of going back ad infinitum. Just to show you a different county, we'll go back to Frederick County, and we'll pull up that property that I showed you guys earlier. The one with the great wallpaper and shag carpet. So this is the Smith Molesworth farm. So again, it's handwritten, but over on the left, we see Liber folio, so 1086/98. So 1086/98. We're in Frederick County now, 1086/98. Go. There's the deed. Being the same as Liber 913 folio 411 and Liber 955 folio 587 by corrective deed. So apparently there was a correction to the deed at some point. But again, we can just jump to new volume and keep jumping back in time and getting the entirety of the records.
In theory, that if a particular property wasn't recorded back several centuries, you can, in theory, detect when certain buildings were built.
You can, absolutely. You know, a lot of times, occasionally it will specifically mention the buildings on the property, but a lot of times it will say, you know, along with all buildings and appurtenances associated with the property. I may have misspoke earlier. I did say something that was incorrect. These records are not necessarily tied to the current county boundaries. You will have to occasionally hop county boundaries if the county changed over the years. I do apologize for saying that, because it just occurred to me, I was like, oh yeah, there's a reason why Frederick only goes back to like the 1740s, because it was not Frederick County then. What you will find though, when you get that far back, is typically there will be a mention of what county the record, you know, was originally created in. Any questions about this? I did misspeak about that. I do apologize. Usually I'm not used to going super far back to like the 17th century, but if you were to go that far back, you might have to figure out the county boundaries and figure out which courthouse the deed was.
See where things can get confusing. The integrity of the property changes, meaning there's additions or subdivisions of it. Over time, you know, if you buy some farm and you find out that
Absolutely.
it is, you know.
That is the greatest challenge in doing this. My old wall at work used to have, I had like a big cork board, and I would have like Post-it notes kind of strung up being like, here's 3 acres from here, here's 10 acres from here. They came together in this deed. And That can get extremely confusing. This is a good example, you know, being designated as parcel A is shown on the plat of the subdivision. You know, that's just one parcel, being part of real estate conveyed in a completely different deed. You may have to figure out these additions and subtractions. You may have to kind of, I find it very useful to sketch it out. I'm very much a visual person when it comes to this. So sketching out, you know, this piece of property, here's the reference, here's how they were split, here's how they came together. There's no easy way around that. It's just whatever works best for you.
So you showed us how to go backwards. from
Yes.
Current, is there an easy way to go forward, or is that much more challenging? Like, if you know where your ancestry property is in a record and you wanna see like, well, where is that today?
The best way to go forward is to go through the indices, the indexes. You look for your ancestor's name in the index. It's always easier to go backwards from a known point, because you're going to have the reference to the previous deed. 99.9% of the time, it'll be this. Of course, you know, when you record a deed, you don't know the future. You don't know who it's going to go to or when. So you're gonna have to do the hard work of going through the index. Which I say it's hard work, but they try to make it as easy as possible. Again, you know, like I'll show you again how that looks. If we go over on the left here, retired indices, oh, no, retired, active indices. Let's say we know our ancestor sold or, you know, let's say between 1851 and 1959, that's a huge range, but you know, if we know that they sold a property between 1867 and 1916 and their last name begins with S, we can bring up the index and we can find them somewhere in the index. It's, again, just kind of digitized microfilm, but it's all there. And that will give you, yep. So pretty, as I said, this is most of the work you're gonna do. The meat of this is going to be done in Maryland Land Record. It is a phenomenal resource. Once you figure out how to use it, how to best search, kind of the basics of jumping to different volumes and things like that. But it's all there. It's all very exciting. One thing I should mention is, you know, over here in our window, there's a few different tools that we can use. We can press the little save icon to save that, and we can download it to our thing. Print directly from it. If it's for some reason you need to rotate it, you can press the little spinny icon up here. If your eyes aren't as good as they used to be, like mine, you can zoom in, you can zoom out. There's a few.
What is that frequently occurring in family names? Is it property or what is that?
See, it says, to the searcher, certain family names or surnames and page on which they are separately grouped will be found in the proper ruled block below according to large alphabet divisions. You know, one of the things with these indexes, and if you've done historical research on through deeds and deed books, you'll find, again, it's not perfectly alphabetical because, you know, Shriver might record their deed in, you know, 1954, and then Schultz is going to come along in 1957. Okay, that's alphabetical. But if, you know, Shaw, if I came in and bought a property and, you know, between that, I'd be listed next because that's the order in which you record these deeds. It's the order in which they happen. They do try to, as I said, kind of big alphabet group them is, so you're going to see the SHs, the SCs, the, you know, SWs or whatever all together, but maybe not necessarily in alphabetical order. I'm trying to find a good example of that, but I'm sure if you look close enough, you'll see it.
Right.
Here, Sidwell, Sin, Sipper, you know, like it's not perfect, but there are some really interesting ways to use this resource. One of my favorite tools is this little highlighter. So when you find your family name in there, you can highlight it. So that way, if you print it out or save it, you know exactly where you want to look.
If you print it out, part of that page is not readable. Is the original still exist somewhere?
The original would be at the county courthouse, or the Maryland State Archives. So if you can't read it, that's an excellent point. I'm glad you brought that up. The first person you'd want to call would be the name that you see at the top here for the county. So again, this is Frederick County. Yeah, lead site. You're going to want to call that number right there. If you need help otherwise, there is a handy little help button up here at the top. It's going to give you guides for how to use things, troubleshooting. It's also going to give you the information of who to contact at the archives. And it'll have information on kind of, yeah, so where are the original land records, either at the circuit court where they were recorded or at the Maryland State Archives. And then I have a link to the guide to government records at the state archives. So to make your job easier, I would just call the courthouse, ask if they have the originals. If they don't, they're going to say they're at the archives. Here's who to call
So
them.
the Maryland State Archives are the ones in Annapolis, is that?
Yes,
Archives?
yep.
Okay, yeah.
Yep, the hall of records
A
there.
nice, small place.
It's a
Very common.
really, really wonderful facility. I've never had a bad interaction with the staff there. They're very, very, very helpful. So the last thing I wanted to talk about here, here we go through, is the digital image reference system for land survey, subdivision, and condominium plats. It's a mouthful, which is why the state usually just refers to it as plats.net. That used to be.
Can I ask you one question?
Oh, sure.
Back to
Yeah.
the land things. Would you be able to tell us quickly about how patents work and how you would find records of land that was patented? So it's original owner, right?
That is, I'm so glad you said that because you're gonna find that in plats.net.
Okay.
Yes, man, you guys are making it so easy on me today. Plats.net, so. They just updated the web address for this, so it is no longer plats.net, it is plats.msa and maryland.gov. It looks very similar to Maryland Land Rec. You know, the layout is the same, you've got your select county, unlike Maryland Land Rec, you don't need to log in, you don't need to have a email address and password. Like Maryland Land Rec, you're gonna start with the county. Pick a county from the drop-down box. In this case, I picked Carroll County just to mix it up a little bit. Again, information on the clerk of the circuit court, how to contact them. Very similar looking to Maryland Land Rec, but you'll notice the search options are different. Basic search. Basic search is great. You have the book number, page number, if you know the plat number. Presumably, you might not know that because you're searching this. So you can bring up the advanced search. The date, you know the date that the land was patented. By far, in my opinion, the most useful one of these is description. Remember back I said almost every Maryland patent has a name associated with it. If you know that name, you can put it in the description and it'll pop up. And I'll show you an example of that. You can select, if you go down below the search bar, plat by reference, so you can look at patented plats. You can look at unpatented plats. There's a bunch of stuff below that that will show up, things like every modern subdivision in the state of Maryland, like will be in here. Things like right-of-way plats for the road system, stuff that's not particularly useful to us. We're basically going to look at the certificates, also potentially land commissions, maybe chancery papers. But your most useful ones are going to be those certificates. And again, we'll show you how that works. In this case, what I did was I clicked on that link right there, certificates patented 1773 to 1920. You're going to get a list, the date, the description. So here's, you know, because it's the A's, there's a lot of additions. So these are, you know, land being added to, addition to Hog Quarter, addition to Joseph's Purchase, addition to Murphy's addition, addition to Venture, addition to Willis Luck. Andrew's Folly, Andrew's Fortune, Andrew's Hope Corrected. Again, like I said, some of these names are pretty entertaining, but kind of gives you a little insight into how they felt about their property. You, from here, can see what has been scanned, and it's either directly scanned from the document itself or scanned from microfilm. In this case, none of these were scanned from microfilm, they're all scanned from the original. Their Maryland State Archives accession number, which is the individual number given to each one of these documents. You're going to click on that accession number, and that will bring you to the original. In this case, this is Akron Pond Resurvey by William Baynard, 382.5 acres. This was done November 20th, 1800. Direct scan of the original. We can go, oh, that's my end, thank you. You can go page by page through the scans, and we will do that now to give you an idea of what that looks like. So here is plats.net. Here's our little drop-down box of all the different counties in Maryland. We'll go with one that we know first, and then we'll go with a random one. So I'm going to go back to that property that we were looking at in Frederick County with the, oh no, that still works. That's not the one I want. This is the one I want. That had that awesome chain of title. Somewhere in here, there's a reference to the original patent, and I don't remember where it is. Oh, what was it called? Oh, here it is. Part of Hobbs Purchase. So like, just imagine we knew our ancestor lived at a place called Hobbs Purchased. So we can go to Frederick County. Once it goes, I was having a lot of trouble with this website the other night. We're going to go to advanced search because we know the name of the property. So in description, we'll put Hobbs. We'll search. Oh, right. I can't put apostrophes. I forgot about that. Hobbs. Oops. So here's anything that's going to come up with a Hobbs. So Francis Hobbs, additional plat. Sometimes, especially with the more recent ones, modern property owners' names will show up. But we are looking for Hobbs Purchase.
Like they say in the family.
Somewhere in here. Where is it? Oh, there it is. Hobbs Purchase, which was patented June 21st, 1750, down here at the bottom, Hobbs Purchase, by John Hobbs, 319-acre tract. Go over to the link on the right with this accession number. And here it is. So that farmhouse that I surveyed all those years ago, here is the original patent. Now, unlike, I shouldn't say unlike, it's very similar to the way that Maryland Land Rec works. The only difference is kind of that you have the save PDF option over here on the right. It looks a little different, but all the same basic tools are here. Your highlighter, you can mark it up, you can print it, you can save it. So this is page 1. And here we see over on the right, page 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So let's bring up page 2. There's that information. That's the first page of it. We can look at page 3. Since these are direct scans, they're individual paper or pages. It's not. And one of the best parts about plats is that there's typically a drawing of the survey. So I'm sure as we look through this, probably since that's the end of the written part, should be on here. Yeah, there it is. There is a drawing of the property. So incredibly useful for those of us who have Maryland roots going back to the colonial era, to the time when all of this land is being, patented out to the original owners in the 17th or 18th century. You are going to be able to find that in here. There are some that have not been scanned. You will occasionally see, let's see, let's go back to that search page. Looks like all these are actually on here, but sometimes there will not be a link on the right. It'll have the number, but not a direct internet link. That just means it has not been scanned. You can change your search so that it will include records with no images, that little checkbox at the top. So that will bring up files that aren't scanned, although I guess none of them are showing up on here, which is great. It's all been scanned. Good job. If it's not scanned, again, contact the state archives. They would be able to help, and you can give them the number. You can say, here's the MSA number. They'll be able to help you with that. As I said, this does cover some modern things. Just for funsies, looks like this is from 2010. Yeah, there you go. There's a nice modern plat. So an incredible amount of information available on here. There was one more thing I was going to show you guys.
So if she wanted to see if one of the plats from one of the sales actually included the slave quarter before it was demolished, she could use this to do that?
You could see if it was recorded in here. Generally, most of the plats that are scanned and recorded on here come from the original land patents. So when the land was first granted by, either the colonial government of Maryland. It may not have a drawing of the property, but it's worth a shot.
Provided, would there be a new plat?
Yes, typically, I should never say yes. Typically, there would be, not always. So, none of these 4 tools that we looked at are like the silver bullet that's going to have everything you need. But they together would help you, kind of make that fuller picture or find that fuller picture. I would say between this and the Maryland Land Rec, that's going to have 90% of what you're looking for. You may not find everything. Not everything has been scanned. Records get lost, records get destroyed, records get misplaced. Sometimes the records are still at the original county courthouse and not at the state archives, things like that. But generally speaking, between Maryland Land Rec, plats, and then again, if you're extremely lucky and your property is listed on the register, you're going to find what you're looking for. So, any other questions? I know this has been a lot. It's not the most exciting topic, but these are fascinating resources. They're incredibly powerful resources. One of the best parts about them from the user's perspective is that there's a whole framework of people out there who can help you with this, who are much more knowledgeable than I am. Having access to the county clerks, direct access to the Maryland State Archives, they can guide you through this process if you do have trouble. So
I know we're talking about Maryland, but when you open the first page talking about Medusa, it had a larger map on there. So just out of curiosity, is Virginia part of that?
Virginia is not part of Medusa. That is proprietary to the state of Maryland. Virginia does have a system. It's called VCRIS. Virginia is much more stingy with access to VCRIS. Typically, the access is easiest to get if you work for a cultural institution, university, a nonprofit. The Balch probably has access or could get access to it. You have to pay for access, and it's not cheap.
There is a public viewer though.
There's a public viewer which will give you some of what you're looking for, but it's not going to give you the full functionality.
Okay.
To get VCRIS, it's VCRIS. Yeah, VCRIS. I forgot what it stands for, but Virginia Cultural Resource Information System or something like that.
Sounds good.
Yeah, it is now. Yeah, for Maryland, for whatever reason, has really gone the extra mile to make all of this publicly accessible and to try to make it as easy to access as possible, by making it free and by digitizing as much as they can.
Well, first, I want to thank you very much for taking my property.
Well, I'm very happy to do it. This is the second time I've lucked out like that. I was giving this presentation in Fairfax a few years ago, and I had just been up in Maryland, and I had been at a brewery located on a farm. And of course, there's a historic sign saying, this was once part of, it's like not his lordship's kindness, but some name like that, like my master's kindness or something like that. I was like, oh, cool. I looked it up as an example in the middle of the class, and this woman says, oh my gosh, like that's my ancestor's property. He moved there in like, 1702. And I was like, wow, yeah, all right. So I'm so happy that it worked out that way because it's exciting. It's so exciting. We're gonna see this.
What about West Virginia? Do they have anything like this?
I have no idea, to be honest.
Or Pennsylvania?
I do not know. Over the course of my career, I did a lot of research in a lot of states. It's been a long time since I've done that. It's been like a decade. I was most familiar with Maryland and Virginia systems. I know that when I was working in a lot of other states, I had to go to the courthouse and do the research there. So, to my knowledge, I haven't seen another state that's quite as robust as Maryland. It's probably out there. I'm sure another state has done something very similar, if not better, but for the sake of our exploration today, we're gonna stick with Maryland, so.
No, thank you very much.
Before we go, I'm just curious, again, going back to this property in Howard County. If it was part of an original patent, it might mention it in the historic context and we could look up the patent.
I'm
Otherwise,
curious for the name Warfield, because I've heard that name, and I think like Wallace Warfield Simpson.
right.
The whole Maryland family, it's Warfield's an old Maryland name.
I don't
I saw it on-
see a reference in there, so that might be a project for a different day, but very exciting. And now you hopefully know how to look it up. If anyone does need any assistance with this, I do work here at the Balch Library every Tuesday night. So you can always give a call or email me through the library, send in a reference request. I'll do my best to help you. Again, this used to be part of my everyday job many, many, many years ago. It's been over a decade since I've done this every single day, so I'm a little rusty, but I should be able to at least point you in the right direction or tell you who to contact to answer your questions if I can't. Any other online questions? No, okay, that was a long time. I thank you guys for bearing with me, going through this. You should all get a handout. If you didn't get a handout or got an incomplete one, the library will email it to you and you'll be all set. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Any sense for how complete these databases are?
Yes. There's. Well, yes and no. It depends on the county. It's such a hard question to answer off the top of my head. The Maryland inventory, they do a pretty good job of keeping that updated, although sometimes it may lag a few years between when they've received the information and when it goes up. The Maryland land recs, it will actually tell you up to the date in which it is complete. So, here for Frederick County, you can see verified through January 31st, 2024. That's today or yesterday. So up to yesterday, it's complete. When you get to the completeness of the older records, again, that's going to depend on the county and what happened to the specific records themselves, whether something happened before they got to the state archives, if there was a fire in the courthouse or something like that, they may not all be there.
You're going to do that in Virginia.
Yeah, you definitely run into that.
I mean, that for county personal information. A lot of records were burned during the Civil War.
Right, that's a huge problem in Virginia, luckily not in Loudoun County. For instance, here in Frederick County, we can see they have the land records index back to 1748. I can't think of a county that's less complete, but let's just pick a random one. Let's pick Baltimore County. They're gonna have indexes back to 17. Oh, no, there we go. Grantor and grantee indexes back to the 1650s. Yeah.
Because I got one that far.
I have a lot of fun. This sounds insane. I have a lot of fun going to, I'll pick different counties, say St. Mary's. I went to college down there, so I know it pretty well. And since it is you know, the oldest county. Here we can go back to, you know, certificates from the 1600s. Like, sometimes it's fun to just look at what these look like.
It says that, and then it's back to.
Yeah, there's,
You know, there's Frederick County, it's Winchester, right? Was that all part of Maryland in some way? I mean,
no, Frederick County, Virginia and Frederick County, Maryland are separate, and it's ironic to me that there are only 2 Frederick counties in the entire country, and they're so close together that it's easy to mix them up, especially when you go through colonial records, because it doesn't always, you know, it's not always clear. I was trying to find like a 17th century one here just for fun, but I don't know. Yeah, we can find one in Baltimore.
what are the names of the patents, like the Northern Neck? Patents go all the way into West Virginia, right?
Yes. Yeah, the Northern Neck land grant was everything between the Potomac and the Rappahannock and all the way out to the source of the Potomac, so. Absolutely massive. You don't have any tract in Maryland that's anywhere near that big. Trying to- Yeah. I'm trying to think, there's one in
Arthur's Choice.
Arthur's
Supposed to
Choice.
be 1683, and Falls Hill was supposed to be 1616.
Let's see, Arthur's Choice.
I don't know if they had the apostrophe or
Doesn't,
not.
oops.
It might have had an apostrophe.
Yeah, the way that this searches, you don't want an apostrophe, like it doesn't, for some reason, it doesn't process apostrophes and other letters. Okay, that didn't show up. That's weird.
Falls
And that's in Baltimore County?
It would have been originally, but then moved to Hartford. I think.
Okay,
So you know, like how when the counties change.
Right,
So I
right.
don't know.
Let's
It's also Baltimore County.
try Falls. Sometimes you have better luck.
What name were you asking again?
Falls Hill or Arthur's
Why
Choice?
nothing's coming up.
Under Baltimore County or.
Let's try Hartford. And search. Arthur's. That's not Arthur's Woods. Nope, that's all later. I'm gonna check Baltimore County again, I bet. I think it's just being slow. For some reason, this website has been incredibly slow. Okay, there we go. Okay, it was Arthur's Choice, you said? I'm not seeing Arthur's Choice, I'm seeing Arthur's Edition.
See, those are all more recent. It
Mhm.
was like 16, that's 1683.
Yeah, that should be. Hmm.
Are there any local genealogy groups that get together here in Fountain County?
There is a Facebook group, that's, Loudoun County Genealogy. They do a lot, like they post questions and there's a forum for people to
People
talk.
get together.
I
No,
don't
there
see it
used
on
to
there.
be a genealogy.
You don't wanna
club
get
or
sucked
group,
into
but
spending
it,
time.
Just messing around on this, yeah, this is,
like early 2000s, so there isn't really a
earlier
earlier
one, even that you showed us.
right.
I would say that
The region it's in.
City.
there's a lot of.
You said the other one was Falls something?
Yeah, no,
It says Falls Hill.
Falls Hill.
Interesting, we had a vote we did there.
Sometimes, Falls Hill, oh, that's Falls Hill View, that's a subdivision from the 2000s.